September 8, 1944. London. 6:43 p.m. A sudden deafening roar tears through the evening air. No warning siren, no approaching aircraft. Just silence, then obliteration. A massive crater now sits where homes once stood. 16 people are dead. The British government is baffled. Winston Churchill's advisors scramble for answers. What they don't know yet is that they've just been hit by the world's first ballistic missile, a weapon that travelled faster than sound, reached the edge of space, and heralded a new era of warfare. But this was just one of dozens of secret weapons developed in the shadows during World War II. Some changed history. Others were too terrifying to ever be used again. From death rays that Japan tested in the Pacific, to a nuclear bomb that ended the war in a blinding flash. From invisible submarines that hunted silently beneath the waves, to jet fighters that tore through the sky at unprecedented speeds. This is the hidden arsenal of World War II, the top 10 secret weapons that shocked the world and shaped the future of war forever. By 1939, the world had already seen the horror of industrialized warfare in World War I. Machine guns, poison gas, tanks. But as the Second World War erupted, military planners knew that this conflict would be different. Technology was advancing at a staggering pace. Radio, radar, chemistry, physics, nations weren't just fighting with soldiers, they were fighting with scientists. In Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler became obsessed with what he called Wunderwaffen, wonder weapons, devices so advanced, so devastating, that they could turn the tide of war even as Germany faced overwhelming Allied forces. In the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt quietly authorized the most expensive secret project in human history, the Manhattan Project. $2 billion, over 130,000 employees, a single goal: build an atomic bomb before the Nazis did. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Imperial Japan pursued experimental weapons ranging from biological agents to energy beams, tools of a desperate empire willing to try anything to stave off defeat. And Britain was pioneering inventions that would save millions of lives. Radar systems that detected incoming bombers, sonar that hunted U-boats, and a tiny electronic fuse that revolutionized anti-aircraft warfare. This wasn't just a war of nations. It was a war of innovation, a technological arms race where brilliance and brutality collided in laboratories, factories, and top-secret testing grounds. The weapons we're about to explore were developed in absolute secrecy. Many remained classified for decades. Some were engineering marvels, others were moral nightmares, but all of them changed the course of the war and the future of humanity. Let's begin. Our countdown begins with a weapon most people have never heard of, but one that military historians call the most important invention of World War II. It's not a bomb, not a missile, not even a gun, it's a fuse, a small 5-pound device that fit inside artillery shells and anti-aircraft rounds, and it saved tens of thousands of Allied lives. Before 1943, shooting down an enemy aircraft was brutally difficult. Anti-aircraft gunners had to estimate the target's speed, altitude, and trajectory, then set a mechanical timer on their shell, hoping it would explode near the plane. The success rate? About 2%. That meant for every 100 shells fired, 98 exploded harmlessly in the sky. Shooting down a single aircraft required, on average, over 2,500 rounds. Then came Section T, a top-secret research division buried deep within the US Office of Scientific Research and Development. Their mission? Create a shell that could think. The proximity fuse was the result. Using miniature radio transmitters and vacuum tubes small enough to survive the violent G-forces of artillery fire, these fuses could detect when they passed near an aircraft and detonate automatically. The technology was so sensitive it was classified higher than the Norden bomb site. Soldiers weren't even told how it worked. They just knew their odds of hitting Japanese dive. Bombers had suddenly skyrocketed from 2% to over 40%. The weapon was first used in combat during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in 1944. Japanese pilots, accustomed to weaving through predictable flak bursts, suddenly found themselves shredded by shells that exploded exactly when they passed nearby. American ships reported shooting down enemy aircraft at rates never before seen. The Japanese called it black magic. At the Battle of the Bulge, proximity-fused artillery shells devastated German infantry advancing through the Ardennes forest. The shells exploded 30 feet above the ground, raining shrapnel down on troops who thought they were safe in their foxholes. Winston Churchill later said the proximity fuse was one of the three most important Allied technologies of the war, alongside radar and the atomic bomb. But its impact went beyond World War II. After the war, proximity fuse technology evolved into the guidance systems used in modern missiles. From Patriot interceptors to Tomahawk cruise missiles, a 5-pound fuse, hidden inside a shell, the unsung hero of Allied air defense. Germany, 1945. The Eastern Front, Soviet tank crews advancing under cover of darkness suddenly start dying. One after another, precise shots through the blackness. No searchlights, no flares, just death from an enemy they cannot see. The Soviets are baffled. How are the Germans seeing them? The answer: Nachtjäger, night hunters. Nazi Germany had developed the world's first practical military infrared night vision system, and it was mounted on their Panther tanks. The device was called Vampire. It consisted of an active infrared searchlight and a receiver scope that could detect the reflected infrared light, invisible to the naked eye but clear as day, through the viewer. By 1945, Germany had equipped approximately 50 Panther tanks with the Vampire system, and it saw combat on both the eastern and western fronts. But it wasn't just for tanks. German engineers also created a portable version for infantry, a bulky backpack system paired with the STG-44 assault rifle. Soldiers equipped with this gear could engage targets at night from over 400 yards away. For the first time in military history, darkness was no longer a sanctuary. The technology was crude by modern standards. The infrared lamp consumed enormous power and needed to be mounted on vehicles. The image quality was poor, ghostly green outlines in a sea of black, and the range was limited to a few hundred meters. But it worked. Allied intelligence only learned about the Vampire system near the war's end, when American and Soviet forces overran German research facilities. They found prototypes, technical documents, and a few operational units. Had Germany developed this technology earlier, say, in 1942 instead of 1945, the impact on the Eastern Front could have been catastrophic. Nighttime was when Soviet armor felt safest. Vampire took that advantage away. After the war, both the United States and the Soviet Union seized German infrared technology and scientists. The knowledge gleaned from these captured systems directly informed the development of Cold War-era night vision, technology that would later define conflicts from Vietnam to Desert Storm. Today, every modern military force on Earth uses night vision. Soldiers, pilots, tank crews, special forces, they all fight in the dark with technology that traces its roots back to those desperate final months of Nazi Germany. The Vampire, Hitler's night hunter, a weapon born from desperation that changed warfare forever. May the 5th, 1945, Bly, Oregon. Reverend Archie Mitchell and his pregnant wife Elsie take 5 children from their church on a fishing trip in the woods. It's a beautiful spring day. The war in Europe is nearly over. The Pacific conflict feels a world away. Then one of the children shouts, "Look what we found!" Seconds later, an explosion tears through the forest clearing. Elsie Mitchell and all 5 children are killed instantly. They are the only World War II combat casualties on the continental United States. What killed them was one of Japan's strangest and most ambitious secret weapons, the Fugo balloon bomb. Between November 1944 and April 1945, Japan launched approximately 9,000 unmanned balloons from its eastern coast. Each balloon was 33 feet in diameter, made of paper glued together with potato paste, and carried incendiary devices designed to start forest fires across the American West. The concept was ingeniously simple. Japanese meteorologists had discovered the jet stream, high-altitude winds that flowed from Japan directly to North America at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. By launching balloons into these winds, Japan could strike the continental United States without sending a single aircraft or ship. Each Fugo carried a barometric altimeter that automatically dropped sandbag ballast when the balloon descended below 30,000 feet and vented hydrogen when it rose too high. This kept the balloon hovering in the jet stream for days as it crossed the Pacific. After roughly 3 days, enough time to reach North America, the final sandbag would drop, triggering a fuse that ignited the incendiary bombs and destroyed the balloon itself, leaving minimal evidence. The plan was to terrorize American civilians, ignite massive forest fires, divert resources from the war effort, and prove to Americans that their homeland was vulnerable. Of the 9,000 balloons launched, only about 300 were ever found in North America. They landed as far inland as Michigan, as far north as Alaska, and as far south as Mexico. Most landed in remote forests and wilderness areas, causing small fires that were quickly contained. The US government immediately classified all information about the balloons. Media outlets were asked not to report any sightings. The goal was to deny Japan intelligence about whether their campaign was working. It worked. Japanese military planners, receiving no news coverage from America, assumed the balloons were failing to reach their targets. They discontinued the program in April 1945, but the Fugo had one brief, tragic success: the death of Elsie Mitchell and those 5 children in Oregon. They remain the only combat deaths on the US mainland during World War II. After the war, documents revealed Japan's true ambition: to eventually arm the balloons with biological weapons, including plague-infected fleas, and unleash them on American cities. The Fugo fire balloons represented psychological warfare on an unprecedented scale. No bombers, no ships, just paper, hydrogen, and the wind. Silent, invisible, and deadly. May 5th, 1945. Bly, Oregon. Reverend Archie Mitchell and his pregnant wife Elsie take 5 children from their church on a fishing trip in the woods. It's a beautiful spring day. The war in Europe is nearly over. The Pacific conflict feels a world away. Then one of the children shouts, "Look what we found!" Seconds later, an explosion tears through the forest clearing. Elsie Mitchell and all 5 children are killed instantly. They are the only World War II combat casualties on the continental United States. What killed them was one of Japan's strangest and most ambitious secret weapons, the Fugo balloon bomb. Between November 1944 and April 1945, Japan launched approximately 9,000 unmanned balloons from its eastern coast. Each balloon was 33 feet in diameter, made of paper glued together with potato paste, and carried incendiary devices designed to start forest fires across the American West. The concept was ingeniously simple. Japanese meteorologists had discovered the jet stream, high-altitude winds that flowed from Japan directly to North America at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. By launching balloons into these winds, Japan could strike the continental United States without sending a single aircraft or ship. Each Fugo carried a barometric altimeter that automatically dropped sandbag ballast when the balloon descended below 30,000 feet and vented hydrogen when it rose too high. This kept the balloon hovering in the jet stream for days as it crossed the Pacific. After roughly 3 days, enough time to reach North America, the final sandbag would drop, triggering a fuse that ignited the incendiary bombs and destroyed the balloon itself, leaving minimal evidence. The plan was to terrorize American civilians, ignite massive forest fires, divert resources from the war effort, and prove to Americans that their homeland was vulnerable. Of the 9,000 balloons launched, only about 300 were ever found in North America. They landed as far inland as Michigan, as far north as Alaska, and as far south as Mexico. Most landed in remote forests and wilderness areas, causing small fires that were quickly contained. The US government immediately classified all information about the balloons. Media outlets were asked not to report any sightings. The goal was to deny Japan intelligence about whether their campaign was working. It worked. Japanese military planners, receiving no news coverage from America, assumed the balloons were failing to reach their targets. They discontinued the program in April 1945, but the Fugo had one brief, tragic success: the death of Elsie Mitchell and those 5 children in Oregon. They remain the only combat deaths on the US mainland during World War II. After the war, documents revealed Japan's true ambition: to eventually arm the balloons with biological weapons, including plague-infected fleas, and unleash them on American cities. The Fugo fire balloons represented psychological warfare on an unprecedented scale. No bombers, no ships, just paper, hydrogen, and the wind, silent, invisible, and deadly. What if I told you that Nazi Germany was developing a stealth jet fighter in 1944, 40 years before the F-117 Nighthawk? It sounds like science fiction, but buried in the archives of captured German technology is one of the most advanced aircraft designs of World War II. The Horten Ho 229, also known as the Gotha Go 229, this aircraft looked like something from a distant future. It had no tail, no traditional fuselage, just a smooth flying wing shape powered by twin-jet engines. The Horten brothers, Walter and Reimar, were aviation pioneers obsessed with aerodynamic efficiency. They believed the flying wing was the perfect design: minimal drag, maximum lift, and exceptional range. But they also stumbled onto something else: radar invisibility. The Ho 229's wood and metal composite frame and its sleek, angular shape gave it a significantly reduced radar cross-section compared to conventional aircraft. This wasn't intentional stealth. Technology, not in the way the US would later design the B-2 Spirit, but it was a step in that direction. The aircraft was designed to meet Hermann Göring's 3,000 requirement: a bomber that could carry 1,000 kilograms of bombs over 1,000 kilometers. At 1,000 kilometers per hour, the Allies had no bomber that could meet those specs. Neither did Germany, until the Ho 229. By early 1945, the prototype Ho 229 V3 was nearing completion at the Gotha aircraft factory. It featured 2 Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines, the same engines used by the Me-262 jet fighter, and was capable of speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. But in April 1945, American forces captured the Gotha factory before the V3 could be completed. The prototype was shipped back to the United States, where it was analyzed by military engineers. What they found astonished them. The Ho 229 wasn't just fast, it was nearly invisible to radar modern. Tests conducted by Northrop Grumman in the 2000s revealed that the Ho 229's radar signature was approximately 20% smaller than conventional WWII aircraft. Combined with its speed, this would have made it incredibly difficult to intercept. If Germany had mass-produced the Ho 229 in 1943 instead of 1945, the strategic bombing campaign over Germany could have faced catastrophic losses. Allied bombers, already vulnerable to Me-262 jets, would have been hunted by an even deadlier predator. But like so many Nazi wonder weapons, the Ho 229 arrived too late. Today, the only surviving Ho 229 prototype is housed at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum Restoration Facility in Maryland. It sits in storage, a ghost from a war that ended before its time. The Horton Ho 229, the world's first stealth jet, a glimpse of the future, buried in the ashes of the Third Reich. Summer 1940. The Battle of Britain. Night after night, hundreds of German bombers darken the skies over England. The Luftwaffe is overwhelming. Britain stands alone. But there's a problem the Germans don't understand. No matter when they attack, British fighters are always there. Waiting. How? The answer is a technology so secret that even most British soldiers don't know it exists. Radar, radio detection and ranging radar was Britain's invisible shield, a network of coastal towers, each transmitting radio waves and listening for echoes bounced back by incoming aircraft. The Chain Home System, as it was called, could detect enemy bombers over 100 miles away. This gave British fighter squadrons precious minutes to scramble, climb to altitude, and intercept the raiders before they reached their targets. Without radar, Britain would have been blind. The Royal Air Force would have been forced to fly constant patrols, burning fuel and exhausting pilots just waiting for an attack that might never come. With radar, they knew exactly when, where, and in what strength the Germans were coming. Winston Churchill later wrote, "The Royal Air Force could not have won the Battle of Britain without radar." But radar wasn't just a British innovation. By 1941, both Germany and the United States were developing their own systems. The difference was in how it was used. Germany saw radar primarily as a defensive tool, for anti-aircraft guns and night fighters. Britain and America integrated it into offensive operations, guiding bombers through clouds, directing naval gunfire, and hunting submarines beneath the waves. American destroyers equipped with surface search radar could spot enemy ships long before visual contact. British bombers used H-2S ground mapping radar to navigate through total darkness and bomb targets they couldn't see. And then came the cavity magnetron, a compact, powerful radar transmitter developed by British scientists and shared with the United States in 1940. This device shrank radar systems from room-sized installations into units small enough to fit aboard fighter aircraft. Suddenly, night fighters could hunt bombers in complete darkness. Submarines could be detected from the air. Ships could navigate and fight in fog, rain, and blackness. Radar didn't just change one battle, it changed the nature of warfare itself. After World War II, radar became the foundation of air traffic control, weather forecasting, missile guidance, and space exploration. But in 1940, it was Britain's secret weapon, the invisible eye that saw everything. The Atlantic Ocean, 1942. Convoys of merchant ships crawl across the grey, frigid water. Inside their holds, food, fuel, ammunition, everything Britain needs to survive. Below the surface, invisible predators wait. German U-boats. At the height of the Battle of the Atlantic, Nazi submarines were sinking Allied ships faster than they could be replaced. In 1942 alone, U-boats destroyed over 1,600 ships, nearly 8 million tons of cargo sent to the bottom of the sea. But by 1943, the tide was turning. Allied sonar, radar, and air patrols made the ocean increasingly deadly for submarines. U-boats that once hunted freely were now being hunted. Admiral Karl Dönitz knew that Germany's conventional U-boats were becoming obsolete, so he authorized the development of a revolutionary new submarine, the type WWII. This wasn't just an improved U-boat, it was a completely different kind of vessel. Traditional submarines were really surface ships that could temporarily submerge. They spent most of their time on the surface, diving only to attack or evade. Their diesel engines required air, so they had to surface frequently to recharge batteries. The type WWII was designed to stay submerged for weeks. It featured a streamlined hull, enormous battery capacity, and a snorkel system that allowed diesel engines to run while just below the surface. Its top underwater speed was 17 knots, faster than most Allied warships. Even more terrifying, it could dive to depths of 850 feet, far below the effective range of most depth charges. And it was quiet. So quiet that Allied sonar often couldn't detect it until it was too late. The Type WWII carried 23 torpedoes and could reload all 6 torpedo tubes in less than 20 minutes. Underwater, previous U-boats took hours. If deployed in large numbers, the Type WWII could have devastated Allied shipping and extended the war by years. But once again, Germany's ambitions exceeded its industrial capacity. The Type WWII entered production in 1944, but by then, Allied bombing had crippled German shipyards. Of the 118 Type WWIIs built, only 4 were ready for combat by May 1945. None ever sank an enemy ship. But after the war, the Allies were terrified of what they'd found. The Type WWII represented a quantum leap in submarine design. The United States and Soviet Union immediately began reverse engineering captured Type WWIIs. Nearly every Cold War submarine, from America's nuclear fleet to the Soviet Navy, incorporated design elements pioneered by the Type WWII. Even today, the teardrop hull shape, battery-powered propulsion, and streamlined superstructure of modern submarines can be traced back to this Nazi innovation. The Type WWII never changed the outcome of World War II, but it changed the future of naval warfare forever. August 1944. The skies over Germany. American bomber crews are accustomed to danger. German fighters attack them daily. Flak bursts shred their formations. But they rely on one advantage: speed. The B-17 Flying Fortress can outrun most German fighters in a dive. Escort fighters, P-51 Mustangs, can keep the slower Messerschmitt Bf-109s at bay. Then, one day, something impossible happens. A German fighter screams past a bomber formation at 540 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. It doesn't have a propeller, just 2 glowing turbines under its wings. It fires a burst of 30mm cannon rounds. A B-17 explodes. Before the Americans can react, the German fighter is gone, already 2 miles away. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. This aircraft represented a technological leap so significant that it's often compared to the transition from biplanes to monoplanes. Overnight, every propeller-driven fighter on Earth was obsolete. The Me-262 could climb faster, dive faster, and turn faster than anything the Allies had. Its 4 30mm cannons could shred a bomber with a single pass, and its speed made it nearly impossible to intercept. Allied pilots reported feeling helpless. It was like trying to catch lightning, one P-51 pilot recalled. Germany had won the jet race. They'd beaten Britain, they'd beaten America, and for a brief, terrifying moment, it seemed like Nazi air superiority might be restored. But the Me-262 had problems. Its Jumo 04 engines were temperamental. They required rare materials that Germany didn't have. They burned out after 10-25 hours of flight. And Allied bombing had destroyed most of the factories that could produce them. Worse, Adolf Hitler himself sabotaged the program. When he first saw the Me-262, Hitler demanded it be used as a bomber, not a fighter. Designers had to waste months reconfiguring the aircraft to carry bombs, delaying its deployment as an interceptor. By the time the Me-262 entered mass production in 1944, Germany was already losing the war. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead, and Allied air superiority meant Me-262s were often destroyed on the ground before they could take off. Still, in the hands of skilled pilots, the Me-262 was devastating. Luftwaffe ace Adolf Galland flew the Me-262 and said, "It was like an angel pushing from behind." German jet pilots shot down over 500 Allied aircraft. Had the Me-262 been deployed in 1943 instead of 1944, the strategic bombing campaign over Germany might have failed entirely. After the war, both the United States and Soviet Union captured Me-262s and dissected them. American engineers were stunned by how advanced the design was. The Me-262 directly influenced the development of the F-86 Sabre, the MiG-15, and virtually every jet fighter that followed. Today, aviation historians call the Me-262 one of the most important aircraft ever built, not because of what it achieved, but because of what it represented. The dawn of the jet age. Segment 10. Weapon number 3. The WWII ballistic missile, 40 mm, 46 wanners. Visual. V2 launches. Rocket assembly lines. London destruction. Peenemünde Research Facility. Wernher von Braun photos. Narration. September 8, 1944. London, 6:43 p.m. We return to the moment that opened this documentary. A sudden roar. No warning, no time to react, just impact. The V2 ballistic missile has arrived. For 5 years, London has endured aerial bombardment. First, the Blitz, wave after wave of German bombers. Then, the V1 flying bombs, crude pulse-jet cruise missiles that buzzing across the Channel. The V1 was terrifying, but it could be shot down. Anti-aircraft guns and fighters destroyed nearly half of all V1s before they reached their targets. But the V2, there was no defense. It traveled faster than sound. It launched from mobile platforms that could be moved and hidden, and it struck with no warning, because by the time you heard it, it had already exploded. The V2 was the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile, 46 feet tall, weighing 27,000 pounds. Powered by liquid oxygen and ethanol, it could reach altitudes of 55 miles. Technically, the edge of space. Its payload was a 1-ton warhead of high explosives. Between September 1944 and March 1945, over 3,000 V2s were launched against Allied targets. Most hit London, but others struck Antwerp, Paris, and other cities. They killed over 9,000 people. Thousands more were wounded. But the true horror of the V2 wasn't just what it did. It was where it was made. Deep underground, in a massive tunnel complex called Mittelbau-Dora, tens of thousands of slave laborers were forced to build V2 rockets under unimaginable conditions. Prisoners from concentration camps worked 18-hour shifts in freezing, toxic environments. They were beaten, starved, executed for the slightest mistake. More people died building the V2 than were killed by it. This was the dark heart of Nazi wonder weapons, advanced technology built on a foundation of human suffering. The man behind the V2 was Wernher von Braun, a brilliant engineer who claimed he was only interested in space exploration. But he was also a member of the Nazi Party and the SS. He knew about the slave labor. He visited the production sites. After the war, the United States pardoned von Braun and brought him to America under Operation Paperclip. He became the chief architect of NASA's space program, designing the Saturn V rocket that would send humans to the moon. The Soviet Union also captured V2 technology and German scientists. Their version, the R1, became the foundation of the Soviet space program and the ICBMs that defined the Cold War arms race. In a twisted way, the V2 did exactly what von Braun always claimed he wanted. It opened the door to space, but that door was built on mass graves. The V2 wasn't just a weapon, it was a turning point. It proved that rockets could carry warheads across continents. It made the intercontinental ballistic missile inevitable. After World War II, every major power on Earth raced to build longer-range, more accurate missiles. The V-2 became the ancestor of every modern rocket, from the Apollo program to SpaceX, from Minuteman ICBMs to Trident submarine-launched missiles. The Nazi V-2, a monument to human ingenuity and human cruelty. What if Nazi Germany had built the atomic bomb first? It's the nightmare scenario that haunted Allied leaders throughout World War II. A regime capable of genocide, now armed with a weapon that could incinerate entire cities in seconds. It wasn't paranoia. It was a real race. Germany had some of the world's leading physicists: Werner Heisenberg, Otto Hahn, Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker. These were the minds that had unlocked the secrets of nuclear fission. In 1938, German scientists had discovered nuclear fission in a Berlin laboratory. They understood that splitting uranium atoms could release unimaginable energy. By 1939, the German Army Ordnance Office had begun funding nuclear research. The project was codenamed Uhrenverein, the Uranium Club. Albert Einstein, horrified by the possibility of Hitler acquiring atomic weapons, wrote a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt urging the US to begin its own nuclear program. That letter led to the Manhattan Project. But Germany's nuclear program faced critical obstacles. First, resources. Germany lacked large deposits of uranium. They tried to import it from occupied territories, but Allied intelligence disrupted supply lines. Second, heavy water. Nuclear reactors needed heavy water, deuterium oxide, as a moderator. Germany's only major source was the Vemork plant in Nazi-occupied Norway. In 1943, Norwegian resistance fighters and British commandos sabotaged the plant in one of the most daring raids of the war. Thousands of gallons of heavy water were destroyed, setting Germany's nuclear program back months. Third, prioritization. Adolf Hitler and many Nazi officials didn't believe nuclear weapons could be built in time to affect the war. They diverted funding to more immediate projects like the V-2 rocket. And fourth, brain drain. Many of Germany's top physicists were Jewish. By the time the war began, they'd already fled to Britain or America, where they would help build the very bomb Germany feared. Werner Heisenberg, who led Germany's nuclear program, later claimed he deliberately sabotaged the project because he didn't want Hitler to have the bomb. Historians debate whether this is true or whether it's a convenient excuse for failure. What we know is this. By 1945, Germany had built a small experimental reactor in a cave near Haigerloch. It achieved a sustained nuclear reaction, but it was nowhere near a bomb. When Allied forces captured the site in April 1945, they found a primitive reactor and barrels of uranium, but no weapon. Germany had lost the race. Had they won, the world would be unrecognizable. A Nazi atomic bomb could have been used on London, Moscow, or the Allied invasion fleet at Normandy. The war might have lasted years longer. Millions more would have died, but the Allies won. And 3 months after Germany's surrender, the Manhattan Project succeeded where the Nazis had failed. On August 6, 1945, the world witnessed the first use of an atomic weapon, Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki. The nuclear age had begun, not in Berlin, but in the New Mexico desert, July 16, 1945. 5:29 a.m., Alamogordo, New Mexico. In the pre-dawn darkness of the American desert, a steel tower stands 100 feet tall. At its top, a device called the Gadget. Inside that device is roughly 13 pounds of plutonium, compressed into a sphere the size of a softball. Surrounding it are thousands of pounds of conventional explosives, wired to detonate simultaneously with microsecond precision. Scientists huddle in bunkers 6 miles away. They've spent 3 years and $2 billion building this moment, but no one knows for certain if it will work. Some fear it will fizzle. Others fear it will ignite the atmosphere and destroy the planet. At 5:29 a.m., The explosives detonate for a fraction of a second. Nothing happens. Then, the desert becomes brighter than 1,000 suns. A fireball, hotter than the surface of the sun, vaporizes the steel tower instantly. Sand fuses into radioactive glass. A shock wave tears across the desert, rattling windows 120 miles away. A mushroom cloud rises 8 miles into the sky. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientific director of the Manhattan Project, watches in silence. Later, he will recall the words of the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. The atomic bomb, the most devastating weapon ever created, has been born." But this wasn't just one weapon. It was the culmination of the largest scientific endeavor in human history. The Manhattan Project employed over 130,000 people across multiple secret facilities. Los Alamos, New Mexico; Oak Ridge, Tennessee; Hanford, Washington. Each site played a crucial role in a puzzle that most workers didn't even know they were solving. The project consumed more electricity than some entire states. It required innovations in metallurgy, chemistry, physics, and engineering that didn't exist when it began. 2 types of bombs were developed: Little Boy, a uranium-based gun-type weapon that would be dropped on Hiroshima, and Fat Man, a plutonium-based implosion weapon that would destroy Nagasaki. The uranium for Little Boy came from Oak Ridge, where massive electromagnetic separators enriched uranium-235 atom by atom. The plutonium for Fat Man came from Hanford's nuclear reactors, where uranium was transmuted in secret underground facilities. The scientists who built these weapons were among the greatest minds of the 20th century: Enrico Fermi, Niels Bohr, Richard Feynman, Edward Teller. Many were refugees from Nazi-occupied Europe, driven by the fear that Hitler might build the bomb first. But by July 1945, Germany had surrendered. The European war was over. Japan, however, fought on. President Harry Truman faced an impossible choice. Intelligence estimates suggested that invading mainland Japan would cost over 1 million Allied casualties and kill millions of Japanese civilians and soldiers. Japan's military leadership had vowed to fight to the last man, woman, and child. Truman authorized the use of the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, a B-29 bomber called Enola Gay dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima. The bomb detonated 1,900 feet above the city at 8:15 a.m. In an instant, 70,000 people were vaporized. Buildings within a mile of Ground Zero were obliterated. Fires raged across the city. By the end of the year, the death toll would reach 140,000 tons. 3 days later, Fat Man destroyed Nagasaki. Another 70,000 dead. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. World War II was over, but the nuclear age had just begun. The atomic bomb didn't just end the war, it changed the fundamental nature of human conflict. For the first time in history, humanity possessed the power to destroy itself. The Cold War arms race would produce bombs thousands of times more powerful than Little Boy and Fat Man. Hydrogen bombs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched nukes, enough firepower to end civilizations several times over. And it all began in the New Mexico desert on that July morning in 1945. The Manhattan Project was the most expensive secret weapon of World War II, but more than that, it was the most consequential invention in human history, a weapon so powerful that it has never been used in war since. Not because nations lack the weapons, 9 countries now possess nuclear arsenals, but because everyone understands the terrible truth. In a nuclear war, there are no winners, only survivors and ghosts. The secret weapons of World War II didn't just win battles. They redefined warfare itself. The proximity fuse evolved into smart munitions and missile defense systems. Nazi infrared night vision became the thermal imaging systems. used by every modern military. The Fugo fire balloons proved that intercontinental attacks were possible, foreshadowing ICBMs and global strike capabilities. The Horten-Ho Tu-9 stealth characteristics inspired the B-2 Spirit, and F-35 fighters' radar became the backbone of air defense, air traffic control, and space exploration. The Type WWII submarine design shaped every naval vessel that came after, leading directly to nuclear-powered submarines that patrol the oceans today. The Mi-62 jet fighter launched the jet age. Within a decade, propeller aircraft were obsolete. Today, every fighter jet, airliner, and military transport traces its lineage to those German turbojets. The V-2 rocket became the foundation of the space race. The same technology that bombed London put humans on the moon and now launches satellites, space stations, and interplanetary probes, and the atomic bomb. It created a paradox, a weapon so terrible that its very existence prevents its use. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction has, paradoxically, helped prevent World War III for 80 years. But these weapons also revealed something darker about human nature. We are capable of extraordinary innovation, but often only when driven by fear and desperation. The greatest scientific minds of the 20th century devoted themselves to building weapons of unprecedented destruction. Slave laborers died by the thousands building rockets. Cities were incinerated in nuclear fire. Progress and horror intertwined. Today, we live in a world shaped by the secret weapons of World War II. Stealth aircraft, guided missiles, nuclear deterrence, satellite surveillance, jet travel. Some of these technologies saved lives, others ended them. But all of them remind us of a fundamental truth. War accelerates innovation, but at a cost measured in human suffering. The question we must ask ourselves is, can we achieve the same breakthroughs without the same bloodshed? Can we innovate for peace as effectively as we once innovated for war? History hasn't answered that question yet. But the secret weapons of World War II, brilliant and terrible in equal measure, remain as a warning and a challenge to every generation that follows. In the summer of 1945, the world exhaled. The deadliest conflict in human history was over. 50 million people had died. Cities lay in ruins. Entire nations were shattered. But the weapons that ended the war didn't disappear. They evolved. They proliferated. They became the foundation of modern military power. Every jet fighter that screams across the sky carries the legacy of the Mi-262. Every submarine that glides silently beneath the waves owes its design to the Type WWII. Every missile defense system that protects our cities traces its lineage to the proximity fuse, and every nuclear power plant and every nuclear weapon is a direct descendant of the Manhattan Project. The secret weapons of World War II changed everything. They ended the age of conventional warfare and ushered in an era where a single bomb could destroy a civilization. They proved that technology could be humanity's greatest tool and its most terrible curse. As we look back on these weapons, from death rays to atomic fire, we must remember both the ingenuity and the tragedy they represent. We must honor the scientists who worked to defend freedom and mourn the millions who died because of what was created. And we must never forget the lessons of World War II. That innovation without ethics is dangerous, that progress without humanity is hollow, and that the true measure of a civilization isn't what weapons it can build, but whether it has the wisdom never to use them. The secret weapons of World War II shocked the world. They still do.